All right, we're rolling.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our unpaid sponsorship from our good friends at Lubriderm. When it doesn't glide, Lubriderm gives it that slide. How are you, Ben?
I'm really
Just
good, man.
jokes, just jokes. We're not that formal. How's the family? How's everybody?
Uh,
Honey, little Keanu.
family's fantastic.
Hmm.
Keanu's great. Working on unlocking the forward crawl. He's pretty much nailed straight backwards and like
Perfect.
rolling.
Awesome.
So that's cool. It's
Do you
funny because
like do you like grab the legs?
no, he just
Like
does it himself.
No, but like, do you just grab his leg every once in a while and be like, "This is how your leg needs to work. This
Uh,
is flexion, extension. This is rotation." You know?
yeah, like just gently. I mean, we give him a little massage
Of
every
course,
night
of
after
course,
his bath, and
of course,
so yeah, I'll kind of move him
of
around
course.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
we
but
don't
it's
we don't want no Asian Olympic training yet.
no, that's
No force splits.
not yet. No, I'll give him the first 6 months to enjoy life, and then
Of course,
yeah, we'll
of
take it
course.
from there. But it's funny to see because he'll get really frustrated, not going forward, not crawling
Hmm.
yet. So he's on
Yeah,
his belly. He loves being on his belly, and he just gets so. I mean, you just hear it and you see it, and then he collapses and takes a rest, and then gets back up again.
to bring it back to kind of like fitness terms, it's kind of like at those ages, you're almost like one rep maxing every day.
Yeah. Well, you're
at
building
like at like
capacity.
all times. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like kind of cool. Just
Yeah.
always
Exactly.
just working on overdrive, but your replenish and resource is like also working in overdrive and like efficiently.
So
Hopefully, anyway.
I'm really curious about this. Is something I brought up with Honey very early on, which was that I wonder if kids or babies get DOMs because
Well, yeah,
everything's
I got.
new.
Well, dude, there's growing pains in real life, right?
Hmm.
So maybe the baby doesn't understand how to depict that to you. But maybe those
Yeah.
days where like a child is like, "Daddy, my leg hurts," and you're like, "What happened?" He's like, "I don't know," and you're like, "Okay, well, let me know if it gets worse,"
Keep me in the loop.
and then it just goes away. You know what I mean? Like they don't know how to depict what's kind of happening. There's teeth to grow in.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I would assume just like even muscles growing and shaping and always having to tighten and work, but shape and tighten and work and shape and stretch with. I guess it's a pretty cool concept too.
Because if you have like a leg workout for the first time in a
Yeah,
month, let's say, or you do an exercise you haven't done in a while,
yeah,
like you're going to feel sore the next day, maybe for a few days afterwards. And
of course.
I certainly acknowledge that the adult body is different from a baby's, but I just wonder,
Yeah.
like, is there some experience that is like the adult experience with DOMS, where the kid does some new movement, like the muscles are being engaged in a novel way, and then the next day there's like some discomfort, some growing pains, like, and we'll never know. We can't really ask the baby.
Mhm.
Oh, well, we can ask the baby. We just can't expect a coherent reply. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but I just wonder. But it's very, yeah, it's very cool to see. It's very cool to see him grow.
It would be kind of weird because it's like even when that child gets to a certain age, right? How would you depict that to them?
What do you mean?
Like even like let's say like the child gets to like a competent age, like 4, 5 years old, they're
Hmm.
talking now. You couldn't even like depict the question where they can like comprehend it. I don't think. You know what I mean? Like, do you feel DOMS? And you're like, what is that? Muscle soreness. What is that? You know what I mean? Like, it's just I don't know if it's like because
Yeah,
I
how
don't.
would you do
I
that?
guess
Yeah.
would it take like going through the motions of like working out and feeling that context of like, okay, this is what it feels like to squeeze your muscles. I guess some kids that gymnastics.
Do you remember the first time you got DOMS?
I would assume I don't have like a direct clarification situation where I was like, this is it. But from all the soccer I played, I would assume like cramping in my calves and then being sore the next day, it would count as like DOMS, overuse, cramping,
Sure.
muscle strain, DOMS. And like just I guess playing like tournaments and stuff, your legs are very, excuse me, very like tired and like sluggish the next day. So yeah, I would say
So from playing soccer.
yeah, I would say yeah. And then so, until I started working out, and then I couldn't even shower and wash my hair the first week. Remember those days?
I
You ever
I
had those days?
Yeah, and I think of biceps when I think of that, like not being
Yes,
freaked out
yeah,
that I can't like bend my elbow, and being
yeah,
like,
yeah,
"What
yeah,
is this ever
yeah.
going to come? Is this ever going to come back?"
Honestly, man, I remember those days where I would get so pumped that just as you said, you could not touch your shoulder. It was
Yeah,
just like,
that was the
and you know what's
test.
even
Right.
what's even funnier? Just on like a deeper note, had nothing to do with the pump itself. It had to do with my lack of muscle connectivity, I think, and my capacity.
What do you
Like
mean?
I was over. I would almost think of it as because I didn't have full direct lines. I would overuse some like overcapacity certain areas of the muscle fibers, so I wouldn't be able to. They're just overused.
Yeah, yeah,
Versus
yeah.
now you can kind of create that overall capacity, right?
So you're talking about like if there's a kinetic chain, like if muscles work in tandem, and sort of in sequence and in a chain
Exactly.
like motion, that if there's a weak link, then other other muscles in that chain are going to have to overcompensate
Yeah.
to get the work done, to get the
Exactly.
movement done.
Exactly. It's like working in separation of chain versus working in unison with the chain. I think.
Mm,
Like I used to
mm.
really work in that like separation, thinking that somehow that was creating isolation.
Well, I mean, you are isolating, but it's you're also a one complete body. You're not really you don't really
Yeah.
exist in isolated units. So
Yeah.
even though you can train in a way that treats the body as if it's isolated, which
Yeah.
can be useful, if that's all you do, then you're never really practicing being in a body,
Yeah.
in a sense.
And that's why I kind of changed, especially after like working with you and just like exploring everything that like you were already practicing and like even the stuff that you were learning fresh and stuff that we were doing together was like so eye-opening to me that it was like just as you said, isolation through globalization. You know what I mean? Like you can't isolate your biceps unless you know how to support your whole body in that position where you're going to create load and demand.
Yeah, well, you'll certainly optimize the experience, or maybe not. You'll get closer to the best experience you can if you're doing a
Yeah,
bicep curl, like if you're able to
of course.
be aware of the whole and the parts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's structural connectivity, biomechanics,
So
biokinetics, or something.
something like that. So let's start with a bit of background, I suppose. Um, who the fuck are you?
Who am I? Who
Yeah,
are you?
yeah.
Who am
Who
I? Who are you?
who are you,
Who
dude?
am I?
Are you just a dude playing another dude?
No, I think I'm closer to the original dude than ever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm like when I feel like yeah, I'm closer to the scene when Kurt Lazarus realizes he was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude,
Yeah.
and he was really Australian. Yeah, that's definitely what I feel like. Closer to Australia. That's what we'll go with. So Steven Zorbis. Sorry, I got
And
lost. I got lost in Tropic Thunder.
and who is Steven Zorbis?
Steven Zorbis. So who am I? I'm just a guy exploring healthy thoughts, talking to really cool people.
How do you know the thoughts are healthy and the people are cool?
Because I feel good and because I'm talking to you.
Okay. Okay. What kind of healthy thoughts have you been having lately?
You know, thinking about the future. I have a wonderful girlfriend, Sophia, as you know. She gives me lots of healthy thoughts. Just, just thinking of my development too. And I do a lot of reflecting. and and just a lot of reflecting on, again, just my experiences and study them and almost take learning from them. And I just realized, with all the COVID time and all the downtime, I've been obviously able to do a lot more reflecting because nothing to do. And yeah, I just realized I've learned a lot in the last like couple years. I attest a lot of that to you, and just I think life works in funny ways, and if you pay attention, you can really learn a lot. And I think that's just I've turned into a person that really enjoys learning. I think that's kind of what I've learned through COVID.
Hmm. That's cool. What are you learning about, or what have you been learning about that you think's interesting?
So yeah, again, back to my body. I've really been like exploring my body, finding, as what I joke to you, is my alignment. I've been really finding really good connections. I was saying with my like intercostals where my rib cage is, and really just understanding how to like add that to the other building blocks that I've built from just post injury, as I always talk about. That was kind of like the start of the journey for me, and it's cool because I feel like I'm nowhere near this fake thing that we have is perfection,
Mm-hmm.
but I feel like I'm hitting a point where all the bigger sections, all the bigger ideas are coming together, and I can start doing the little smaller building blocks. It like, and I mean that towards not like specific exercises, not specific movements, but like my being able to adapt my body to create that overall connectivity, like we talked about, to perform other movements and stuff like that. I don't know if I'm depicting that properly, but you'll
Well,
definitely help me
yeah, I'll do my best.
out.
Let's put it into context. So you're talking about learning, and you're finding that you're learning a lot about your body, and that the trend maybe sounds like it's heading towards like connection, like
Yeah,
connection within the body. But can you sort of expand on that a little bit and explain what's the goal? Like, what are you heading towards? What's maybe where have you come from, and where are you going?
sure. So I guess the goal for me after the injury, especially, is overall health.
Can you talk about the injury for a moment?
Sure. So, as I mentioned earlier, my soccer background and everything, I played soccer my whole life, probably around, and pretty excessively too, like high level soccer, 2, 3 days a week, up into when I was 18, 19, went up to like 4 or 5 days a week. So a lot of running, a lot of stress on the body, and not, especially back then too, not a lot of recovery knowledge, not just like personally, but just in life.
Mm.
You know what I mean? That was about what, 10, 11 years ago,
Mhm.
something like that. That's when I was really playing a lot. And at the high level too, we had like a physio guy that would come every once in a while, but it was almost looked at as like, especially for like the older coach and like the older people around the team, like a novelty thing,
Mm.
not like a necessity. Like you don't need it. Like you're fine. Like you have up until tomorrow to rest for the next practice.
You're gonna go to
you
bed.
know, yeah, of course you're gonna go and eat. Don't worry, you're gonna go have spaghetti and meatballs. They're all Italian. And you're gonna get strong and you'll be okay. And you're like, okay, all right, cool. All of a sudden you're tearing hamstrings and popping groins and this and that. So, but the injury did come probably around 5 years ago now. 20, no, 2017. I lied. 2017.
Okay.
Probably 3 years ago. 3 years ago now, I popped my hamstring playing in a tournament, soccer tournament.
Yeah.
I kind of reached up into the side with with my pivot foot not moving, so I stepped. The ball bounced further, and instead of kind of moving over, I reached to the side, and that like cross section in my groin area just didn't have the mobility. Breaking it down with the stuff that I know now, definitely from over rotation and building a pattern of continually creating that like transfer of force in the cross of my body. when I reached up into the side, I had already built the patterns of like the muscle already over rotating. That's kind of my idea, and it didn't have the range to go that far, and it
Sure.
said no, thank you, and it said no, thank you. The funny part, you know what the funny part about that was too? At that point, so working with you and like working with Julian too, because you guys were really like the help with me, like really like even Julian helping me meet you, right? All in all, was like really eye opening to me. But prior to that, at Good Life, I I worked with a member there, and we did a lot of like stretching together and a lot of like PNF and like kind of what at the time almost remember we talked about earlier about the baby not knowing DOMs and this and that.
Sure.
I didn't know that I was kind of aligning in a weird way.
Mm.
So we would go into movements, positions. He would do like the same that we would do to a client, you know, back straight, but not just say back straight, like really tell them why you need to have your back straight, open your hips. But they might not understand it in the full context that we're explaining it to them in. They enough to depict it and feel it, but like until you get that understanding of that movement, right? It's like anything in a sport, kicking a soccer ball. You can explain it, but they have to learn it for themselves.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I was kind of in that process with him, and I would get like cramps and this and that, and he would tell me to hold the cramps and continually extend. And then what I kind of looking back at it now didn't realize is like I was really working on like end range conditioning, functional range conditioning, kind of pushing my body to its structural capacity limits, and then having my muscles locked there, and then adjusting my body into a structurally correct position, and basically telling your body, figure it out,
Mm.
right? And whatever is over contracting starts to actually relax. You get other muscle contractions that start to wake up and they start to cramp, but it kind of sometimes those cramps lock you in place, and you're like, it hurts so good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You definitely know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
And then that was cool because it kind of led me to what you guys were doing. But the funny part about all of it is I was actually starting to like up my stretching game at that point too. And the reason I decided to do that is I was like going really heavy in the gym, and I was doing a lot of cross platform. So I'd go to the gym and I would literally deadlift 4 plates, and I would go play soccer in the evening,
Mm.
indoor soccer. Like it was like one of those stupid things where I can do it, so I'm gonna do it.
Sure.
Not realizing that you run the car too hot, the car blows up.
Yeah.
So basically, what happened is I decided that, you know, I needed to get into it. I started stretching with this guy. He really helped me open up my mindset. At the tournament, I had brought my foam roller and my green band, and I'm doing all my stretches. I'm doing all my band work that I learned in Derby courses, all these things. But back to the thing about the baby and the DOMs. If you don't necessarily understand, and I don't mean like the complex stuff about stuff, but like the basics, then you can never get to the complex stuff. And it's good to understand positions, but if you don't understand like structural connectivity and biomechanics, and I know it sounds like crazy words and everything, but at the simplest, it's how do your hips need to be level? Where does the ball and socket need to be? How does your hinge need to be? How does your ankle need to be placed to create that kinetic chain that we talked about? Then even stuff like band work and foam rolling, I find is, I don't want to say useless, but not as useful as people are thinking, and could be even useless and detrimental to you.
Mm.
Because I ended up pulling my hamstring that tournament, and I've never had an injury before. What I was doing prior to the game was yanking on my groin, thinking I was stretching it. But I'll tell you right now, my hip from years of soccer was stuck internally rotated. So when I went into extension, I definitely had muscles that were pulling that should not have been pulling that way on the joint, on the ligaments, on the tendons. And definitely, I don't know this, obviously, but my theory over time of just, as I said, breaking my body down has led me to believe that I probably literally did damage prior to that game.
Mm.
And then the worst part is, the mind is a dangerous thing. So I definitely went into that game. It's funny we're doing this because I've never actually thought about it this in depth before, of actually like surfacely, but this is cool. We're going into it. I definitely went into that game with a cocky mindset of my body, and it was such ignorance.
Mm.
You know, it's one of those dangerous things. I'm sure some Asian proverb somewhere: the less you know, the more dangerous you are. You know, because you think you like know. You're like, I know one thing, bro. I know how to stretch my groin with a green band. I could definitely fucking reach my leg out all the way up here now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I think that's literally what happened. I had a cocky mindset, went into the game, and that's where it led me and humbled me, I would say, to a certain extent, I guess.
That's really interesting. Good connection that you made there.
Sorry if I
So
ramble.
no, that's fantastic.
It's my strong suit.
No problem. So again, putting things into context. So you're playing soccer. You're working on some mobility. You're lifting weights. I'm really interested in the why. I think the why is kind of the deepest level that we can get to in a lot of these cases, and like I'm really into like getting deep into the thought.
That's why we're here. We're just gonna piss that thought out of us.
See what we can dig up. So
Yeah.
I want to try and get down to the why of all this, like whether it's put in the context of a goal or if there's some other way that you explain it. But all of this, like playing soccer, lifting weights, mobility, what's it for? Like what kind of, why are you doing it?
The soccer was like passion. Soccer is pure passion. It was something that I've done for such a young age. Especially for me, it was time with my dad, like a lot of time with my dad, and like so, again, just like the injury, something that I look back on and realize like how much that's helped me shape myself and like be like the person that I am and stuff like that. And so it was more like passion, enjoyment, love. I really enjoyed the game. I still do. Like it's a lot of fun to go out and play, and just like anything, like you're decently good, it's fun to do something when you're pretty good at it. And I
Mm.
was pretty good at it, and as I say, it taught me a lot too. Stuff that I didn't know it was going to teach me, but it taught me a lot, especially like leadership and stuff, which I think is cool. A lot of cross-platform stuff in life, and I always say the same about fitness too. Like there is so much cross-platform and so much cross-platform just in general of like processes and just like the simple basis of things that if you really pay attention, you can learn a lot with just knowing a little bit of information, right? But yeah, so soccer was definitely passion for me. Lifting, as I'm sure there was some sort of prerogative in your starting lifting of this also, was my buddy started lifting. I saw he got a little bit bigger. He came back from university, McMaster, my boy Steven Coots, super good dude. Uh, he came back from McMaster 1 year after first year, and he started lifting. I think he did GoMad or like something stupid like that. Do you know what GoMad is?
No.
Gallon of milk a day.
How much is a gallon? We don't really use gallons in Australia. It's a couple of
I
liters,
think
isn't
honestly,
it?
bro, I think it's like those fucking big jugs,
Yeah.
like those big milk plastic jugs. I think one of those.
So a gallon of milk a day. That was like a dietary protocol.
That's bulking. I joke. Well, I didn't joke about the casein. I actually woke up in the middle of the night for casein and cereal so many times
We're talking about
because
that
casein was
before.
good.
We're talking about
Yeah,
that earlier
before.
about
Yeah, before.
bulking
Yeah,
strategies.
yeah. But yeah, man, crazy. So Stephen Coots came back from school, and he had done Go Mad. He had started working out, and he started getting big. And he was back for the summer, and and he's like, there's Beaches Recreation Center.
Okay.
It was no big box gym, no nothing. It was a recreation center, beaches recreation center. And he goes, let's work out. And I'm like, nah, I play soccer. Nah, nah, nah. He obviously plays soccer too, whatever.
Okay.
Sorry, not obviously. Means that's how we met. We
Okay.
played soccer at a young age. I'm like thinking like we already know. We met at a young age, probably around 4 or 5 years old. Played soccer together, grew up through the years, still great friends. And I'm like, I play soccer. He's like, I play soccer too. I'm like, all right. So he'd wake me up every morning. I hated it, but we went to Beaches Rec Center. And obviously the goal was let's get Jack, go to the beach and pick up girls.
Mm-hmm.
That was the goal. And we started working out. Those were the times where I went to the shower. I couldn't even wash my hair after doing shoulders, arms, back to back. Because obviously I was a bodybuilder with 3 weeks of working out. We're doing drop sets and negatives and literally no muscle capacity. It's like a level 1 NPC character in that got G rush to hell, glitch rush to hell. You're just standing there and everyone else is just killing monsters and you're like dying every second. You know what I mean? But your XP is going up, right? And so doing drop sets and like just probably murdering myself. And back to the patterns, I believe there's so much power in strength training and like in the real capacity of strength training. We'll probably get into that eventually, which we talked about before and many times. But there's such a positive thing in strength training. But if your structure is not correct, it's just a time bomb.
What
It's
do
a
you
time bomb.
can you expand on that a bit? What do you mean by correct?
So just again, just back to like biomechanics. Like if you're not understanding that like certain patterns that you've done your whole life, lock your body in those positions. And if you don't understand how to fix your positions before we start creating contractions, you're going to create those positions to be more and more stuck. Right. And sometimes those positions aren't hindering, but a lot of times, if it's again, that computer position with the upper cross syndrome that everyone has now, or anterior pelvic tilt, what do we normally see? People continually working on those areas not properly. And we'll get into the standards part with the wrong standards,
Yeah.
right?
So
And back to what I was saying, sorry, back to what I was saying
yeah.
about soccer, with the hollow confidence. Confidence not built on any stability, right? Thinking that they're doing the right thing, and thinking that somehow because they're told this standard and they're doing the standard, their body somehow is going to adopt the right position, and then they end up hurting themselves,
I wonder I wonder if psychologically that what we mean by, you know, the correct structure is I think it's actually difficult to define what good is, like what a correct structure is, like in terms of the features of it. Like what does that mean? You could throw out words like balanced or
right? Yeah,
capable, but I think it's
sure.
actually easier to describe it in terms of what it isn't. And you mentioned the example of being like locked into certain
Mm,
positions. Well, it's
sure.
not,
Yeah,
it's about not being locked in certain positions, and what that means is it's about not being forced, not having your agency, your freedom of will, your choice taken away from you. And
yeah,
even when you want to stand up tall, being in a situation where your body doesn't allow it, you want to feel like you can
yeah.
express your body in every way that it
Whatever way
should
you
be able
want.
to express itself. Yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
mean, I think I'm going to make a subtle point here and say it's not
sure.
necessarily any way you want, just to take out the fantastical, where you could say, well, I want to fly, so like
Yeah,
my
of
body should be able
course.
to fly.
We're not Red
Obvious.
Bulls,
It's
by
kind
the
of
way.
obvious, right? But I think it's
Yeah,
more. I think there's a deep intuitive sense of what the body should be able to do. You know, it's like when you. I think we can tell this because you could look at a box, for example, that's like, you know, a few inches off the
yeah, of
ground, and
course, of
you
course.
might just feel like, yeah, I can jump on that. And part of that's based on experience, but I think part of it's just a deep intuition, knowing that, well, that's low enough that I know this body should be able to jump onto that box, you know, without any problem. And if you keep making that box higher, eventually you're going to get to a point where you have this sense of,
Thanks.
yeah, and like and there's maybe a certain point where you can think, maybe I can, maybe I can't, but eventually you're going to get to a point where you think, No, I just know. I just can't. And it's not even
Yeah,
a thought. It's not like a calculation you're running. It's just an intuition that, no, I know I can't jump that high. Like this body will, and this body will probably never jump that high. There's going to be a certain point to that. So I think that there's a deep intuitive sense of what the body is capable of. And I think when the body can't do what we strive to do with it, that we think is realistic, that when we're limited by some, physical restriction, for example, or being locked in a position, then that is a sign that our structure is not correct. So if we can't just, if it's difficult to define correct structure by what it is, it's maybe easier to define it by what it isn't, and that would be an example of it. Like
sure.
correct structure
Yeah,
is having the freedom, or having the freedom of capacity to move
yeah,
in the ways that you feel like you should.
yeah. And the tough part with that too, right, is like, and just to go back to like where I was in my development there, because I
Yeah.
think it'll tie into perfectly with what you're saying, is you can put your body in those parameters, but it's almost like to put it in context, it's almost like too simple that it doesn't work. So it's like, for example, like deadlift, hinge. We know the back needs to be flat and we need to hinge forward. And in the context of the gym life, that's a good hinge. We obviously know there's a lot more to it with the hips, rotation, right? What needs to actually flex and elongate, all that stuff. But that's like considered a good hinge. But what I kind of look as an issue, what I thought was an issue that, but I didn't know was an issue at the time. I figured out later. Sorry, I got jumbled up there. Is I was hinging properly by keeping my back straight. But to break it down, is I didn't know, again, for all those years of playing soccer, I kick with my right foot. Every time I stepped and kicked and transferred power, it was twisting this way. And I didn't notice this, but when I even watched videos of me squatting back before the injury, my whole body on a squat would rotate this way.
Oh, interesting.
And the issue there, I again fit the parameters of everything. Push of the heels, kept my back on a good angles. I came down, hips open, let the knees track wherever they need to track. Got good depth, back was straight. Didn't have any butt wink, nothing. But I would have that rotation. And it was because no matter how much I tried to keep my body in those parameters and made it look like they're in parameters, I didn't understand what that really meant from the internal standpoint.
Did you think you were straight when you were doing the squat? Did you think that you were aligned?
To the parameters, yeah, right? And that's where I didn't know how to break it down at the time, in a sense of like, I looked good. There was no butt wink. Like I said, like I fit those standards. And the worst part is to talk about standards and to kind of segue into what we're going to talk about later. Everyone in the gym, especially the experienced lifters and people that knew and trainers, looks great, dude. Wow, perfect. And going back now, just even looking at a video, never mind. I have a weird brain with, I can remember like even clients like sets and reps, and like just remember even taking weight off their like rack and stuff, right? And I even remember like internally what I would feel like on these squats. And like now that I can, like you said about the baby, I've been there. I'm starting to fix it and not only understand the body positions, but how to actually let my muscles relax and contract and create a new chain in those positions and let go of other bad chains. I can look back and say, and really realize what was going wrong. And that's why I test a lot of it to soccer and that patterning, right? Because everything I did, even when I deadlifted, I was deadlifting 4 plates. My heaviest deadlift was 495, 5 plates. And every time I deadlifted at the top, I had a slight rotation.
Mm.
And where did I pop my hamstring? Where I would compensate. I would use a lot more of my lower left back, and that weakened the hamstring and kind of pulled everything up. And then when I went to reach out, it didn't have that extension.
Mm.
Right. And then that's the tough part, I think, for a lot of people, right? People know they have to squeeze, stretch, contraction, this, that, push, pull, hinge, deadlift. But what does that mean? And that's where like I find the segue to the standards is a tough one, because how do you create standards for that?
Yeah, so
But
let's
before we go into all that,
yeah.
who are you?
Oh, well, that's quite a segue. Or not a segue, that's quite a tangent, I should say. And a segue.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm Ben. I'm Ben Byfield.
I know who you are, but they don't. What does that mean?
Wait,
Give me the
wait. They? Who are
them.
they? Them? What are you talking about? This is just a conversation between two pals.
You're right. You don't know who else is in my head. Just joking. Tell me who you are.
I think that's true, and I also think you probably don't know who else is in your head.
I definitely do not know who's in my head.
And
well, to be honest, probably a lot of versions of me.
I'd hope so.
You know,
It'd be
yeah.
weird if there was someone else in there.
Probably some healthy, some not healthy. But like, I guess that's what the brain is for.
In part, yeah. You could use,
Something,
yeah,
totally.
something like that.
You know.
But yeah, let's assume someone were to get a hold of this file somehow and decide to watch it.
Future, after all this dystopian craziness, and somehow they find our Zoom file sitting in the data farms of Google.
In the great dystopian,
Yeah.
ruins of Google. Yeah. Yeah.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah,
them, Ben.
Yeah, so I'm Ben Byfield. I guess the theme would be movement. So I've been into movement and training and I guess exploring life through the body.
Mm-hmm.
Not exclusively, but recognizing that this is a very fruitful path, and it seemed like I identified very early on that it was a path that not a lot of people seem to pursue, despite its kind of obviousness. Just to be aware of the body and yeah, it doesn't seem like a very common awareness.
It's bizarre to me, and we've definitely touched on this in the past, and I think we're both in agreement on this, that so many people have this thing, your body, and
Yeah.
they're so far removed from it, so far.
Yeah.
But they're still there, and it makes you wonder, like, how can you let yourself get so far removed but still be there?
That's like one of the most fascinating questions. That's something that
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's there are so many layers to it. You can keep peeling back the layers of the onion, but yeah, it's funny because there's a temptation and a risk of speaking in kind of esoteric, like woo-woo terms and making it sound more complicated than it is or needs to be, and even more profound and deep and meaningful. Though I think it is, but like on some level, it's simply just saying that, yeah, we live in a body. Back from the intermission. Just had a little technical hiccup. We're back on.
Yeah,
so
we're good to go.
So I think I was just saying that it's very tempting to an easy trap to make these things sound a bit too complicated or profound and deep and meaningful. But really, I think what I'm talking about is just, in essence, I'm very curious, and I'm very curious about just what's going on. And it was very curious to me, I think, that there was this obvious element to life, the being in a body and how you're moving the body, and the things you can do with the body as well, by watching experts in their field. And there was so much obvious value to taking care of the body and whatnot. And yet you look around and just the average person, at least in my life growing up, didn't seem to really show much interest or awareness of that. And it's a very curious thing, right? It's like if you had starving people and there was a plate of food just a meter
Mm-hmm.
away, and you're there starving and crying out for food, and it's like it's right there, like,
Yeah.
and what's going on? Like, why is that? Why is this thing that's so obvious, um, you know, just not happening? Yeah, go on.
To touch on that, the one thing I'll say though is also it does take the right mindset and the right open mindedness to really understand, I think, or to really explore the context of what you're talking about. Because I think a lot of people that even get into fitness, they don't necessarily feel what we're talking about, that onefulness with the body, because they're striving for something else. You know what I mean?
Mm.
I think, like, like for you especially, and where I would like, because you even said when you were younger, like you used to sit there and just like flex and like,
Yeah, no,
like
not just not just a
well,
global flex,
why
but
not?
once in a while, you try to get the vascularity up, get things popping.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, I'd sit and just kind of just isolate and flex different parts. You do the
Yeah,
chest
of
thing, but
course.
but
Yeah,
not in a showy way. Just I'd be sitting on the bus or at home or something or in school, and
you're
you just
you're exploring your body, right?
yeah.
I
And then
think.
the interesting thing would be sorry, I'll just quickly go on a
Yeah, go on, go on, go
tangent.
on, go on.
Something interesting that would come up with, for example, would be realizing that you can, because the body's fairly symmetrical,
Yeah.
right? And you would
Mm-hmm.
realize that you can do something easily on one side that would be impossible on the other. So for me, one of my earliest memories. Yeah, yeah.
Still.
Well, you realize this is an important or useful way, a sort of lens to look at your
Yeah,
body through. It's
yeah,
striving for some sort of symmetry, or at least trying to investigate
yeah.
why there isn't.
Hit me with that memory.
So the memory was when I was, in primary school, and realizing that I could isolate and lift one eyebrow effortless.
The Rock
Yeah,
says.
doing the people's eyebrow, and
Yeah,
I could do it
yeah.
straight up. I could do it without any practice. As far as I remember, I was just able to
Sure.
make it lift.
Probably saw it one day and you tried it, and all of a sudden, just for you, it clicked. Because I can't
Yeah,
do it for the life of me.
yeah, and then I would try to do it on the right side, and it would be like
Me
they'll just
on both sides.
yeah, they'll just both go up, or it'd be like
Yeah.
just.
Yeah.
And I guess I'd had some awareness of maybe process and training. Maybe I'd done some sort of sport or weightlifting or something by that point. I can't
Sure.
remember. But I just thought, well, there's no good reason that I can't do it on that eyebrow, except that maybe I just haven't practiced it for whatever reason, or I just
That's cool.
it exists. I don't know why, but I'm gonna try to make this work. And so I just made an effort to isolate and lift my right eyebrow at every opportunity that I had. And eventually, it would be like, at first it would be both, and then you'd get like a little, just like a twitch, and then
the twitch.
and I think what would happen is you might even just start to feel something first, like
Of
you just start to
course.
feel
Like
before
hot.
there's any
It's like
movement.
hot. It's hot. It's hot.
Like some
You're burning
sensation.
up. You're burning up. Yeah, I understand.
But I think a key here that I only realized maybe later is that it took a sort of an extreme myopic focus. It's like all my awareness is here. I'm not even thinking about anything else. I'm just like,
Yeah.
and so then you could feel those subtle, there's some sensation. There's maybe some heat or some tingling that wasn't there before. So maybe, there's something's happening. And eventually,
Some sort of signals.
Yeah.
Sporadically firing something.
Yeah, perhaps, yeah. And then eventually you get some small movement. It would be not consistent. Sometimes it would come up alone, sometimes it would still be both. And then you would think, well, what's the difference there? And I'd realize the difference is when I'm able to get it up, I'm ultra focused. It's like an extra level of concentration, when if I don't concentrate as much, both come up. So I realized that if I really, really focus and lock it in, it's not just focusing for a moment, it's staying with it. And then eventually it gets to a point where I don't need to focus at all. I can just, I can play with it. But that process of realizing that, well, first there's an asymmetry, and then you can actually balance things out by focused effort plus time. And then you just kind of keep testing that in different aspects, whether it's strength or flexibility or developing a skill. and it continues to hold up. Like it continues to be true that with focused effort and consistency, you will go in that direction, in the direction that you intend to.
Of course.
And we know this with like things like school, like academically, you know, we learn.
Anything. Cooking, anything.
Yeah.
Hockey, soccer, sports,
Well,
chess.
yeah, but we don't think of it in general terms of just like general physical development and preparation and just,
Which I think is a problem, personally.
Yeah, for sure.
Right?
Yeah, so to bring it back to the, you know, who I am, it's, I don't know, it's a very simple thing, I guess, in this context, and the reason that we're doing something like this. Who I am is someone who is very interested in just life and experience, and I think that we experience life through a body, and that we do a very good job of articulate, like culturally, we do a very good job of talking about our ideas and even our emotions. We might say, you know, I think I like this over that, or I think this is a better idea than that idea, and we can say, well, you know, that felt really good, that was delicious, that was not good, that was disgusting. But we don't have
just to touch on that a little bit, just to get your idea. Do you think getting more in touch with your body and understanding it has helped you understand other aspects of life better, like just everything that you even listed there, and just understand, and even maybe appreciate it better? Like, do you find cross reference?
Yeah, obviously, because we experience life through a body, or in a body, or however you want to describe it. And I think there's a lack of terminology, and there's a lack of practice in discussing these things. So maybe that's something that, you know, I want to work on with you here. Is I think we're the conversations that we tend to have are about the body and our experiences of being in one, and that's very interesting to me, you know, and I think it's probably interesting to a lot of people, but we don't really know how to do it. And yeah, that's fascinating to me. So I'm really interested in learning about life, and I realize that we occupy a body to navigate life and to experience life through. Therefore, if I want to understand life and what's going on better, and ultimately, you know, myself and everything, I need to kind of understand this. Yeah. And then all kinds of questions start to come up when you start that practice and you start that journey. Yeah.
It's crazy. It is. It's such an interesting, as we know, it's such a weird, interesting, just up and down roller coaster of a journey. Just, I guess, just like most things in life too, you don't know a lot of it's happening when it's happening, you know, and then you get to a point, and all the things that you put in play and practice kind of, as we say, come together and learn how to work together. And then that's when we really notice all that work we put in really brought us from an actual point A to a point B, and everything in between wasn't just like a waste of time. All that learning process and everything, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, and it's also easier to talk about these experiences after the fashion. You can look back on them and try to put a narrative together. But yeah, let's bring it back around now that we've kind of, I mean, we'll sort of uncover each other's past, I think, as we go along and over the coming weeks.
Of course.
But the topic that we wanted to talk about today is this idea of standards. So a bit of background, both of us, you know, have spent many years as personal trainers and working in gyms. And, you know, with that, it's a combination of learning and experience. You know, we learn things often academically, you know, reading books, attending seminars, watching videos from our peers. And then we also put these ideas and these concepts into practice in our own training and in training our clients. And that this is kind of what contributes to the personal trainer. It's the knowledge and the experience. That's kind of like any career, really, or any job. And with the knowledge aspect comes this idea of standards. You know, when we're doing things,
Sure.
there are, you know, there are many different protocols, there are different ways of training, there are different approaches. But when it comes to the movement patterns themselves, you know, we have this concept of standards, you know, and this is a standard is maybe, we could just say it's a way of thinking about or describing how a movement should be done.
Safely
And
and effectively. Let's add.
in most cases,
Technically, right?
yeah.
That's what it's advertised as, anyways. For the most part, every time, like
Well,
standard.
that's interesting. That's
safely,
interesting.
effectively, and get results, right? No.
That's interesting because I think you could take it to an extreme case of, well, it depends on context. So you might say, well, for a beginner, the standard for a squat might be prioritizing safety, for example. But then when you get to like the elite of the elite, like someone going for a Guinness World Record, for example,
Of course,
at some point, like the standard that you might put in place there, yeah, you of course you got to be keeping safety into consideration. But you might be sacrificing that to some degree.
You're keeping safety in consideration for performance, for top level performance. So in the sense of like, you're hitting the bare minimum of safety to make sure you're getting the most maximum output. It's like a race car, I guess, anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For the general people, we're looking like the pure economical. How many miles can we get, and how can we make sure that speed bumps on our shocks and all those roads and all those uphills and downhills and wear and tear on the brakes, how can we make sure that stays intact properly for as long as it can?
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
So there's a spectrum there, but yeah, safety is always a consideration. So I've just been thinking about this idea. So the way I'd formulate it is, you know, what is the purpose of standards would be the first question. And then
well, I think
how are they?
Well, yeah, that's a tough one. That's actually a tough one.
I'll lay it out broadly. I'll lay it out broadly, and then we can take it where we want. So what's the purpose of standards is the top level question. Then it's who decides, by what authority are standards kind of set in place? Is it by group kind of consensus, or is it by a single authoritative figure, something in between or something different? And then, so what's the purpose? Who decides them? I guess, those are kind of the main 2 points, and then a lot of other questions sort of spiral out from there.
We'll work into there.
Yeah. So what are your first thoughts?
What's the purpose? My first thoughts, well, I guess it does make sense now that I think about it again. The purpose of standards is to breed results, I would assume. Right? Okay. So if you're looking to hold yourself to a certain standard, that means you're looking to get to that standard. You're looking to work to that standard. That standard, I think, stands for some sort of result of what you're working towards, right? So for example, like doing a squat, learning how to squat. You look for the standard, you don't know how to do it, you work towards that standard, you get the result. Right? So I think standards are maybe a guideline to results.
I think that's the next big question, actually. It just came to mind. Is the standard the goal in and of itself? Is the goal to perform the standard, you know, perfectly or exactly? Or is the standard there to act as more of a guiding star that gives you guidance along your trajectory, or keeps you on a certain trajectory heading towards some goal, but it isn't the goal in and of itself?
I think that's all personal at the end of the day, I guess. Right? It depends where you want to take it, what people's personal goal is. For me personally, I think and use standards I use them as tools to allow me to understand, and then I kind of use those standards and other standards to expand standards together, if that makes any sense.
I'm kind of thinking of that Bruce Lee quote that,
like water. Yeah.
Like water, and that when you pursue a discipline, you should take what works for you, discard what doesn't, and then add something that's uniquely yours. So it's like the standard is something that you begin with, but then you take what
Hmm.
is useful from that for you, from
Of
the
course.
standard, and then you discard what hasn't been useful from that standard, and then you
Yeah,
carry on.
it's almost like you understood like the basis of it, like the actual like meat and potatoes, and then you're putting your own seasoning on it.
Yeah, yeah.
But you
So
need that meat and potatoes to make that meal. You know, like a runner needs to run
yeah, yeah,
to run fast. And then what Usain Bolt does, maybe he creates a little more extension or you know, whatever he does with his hips. But
that
he puts
works for his
his
body.
exactly in his way he like exactly and even him, to be honest, I think he's had like scrutiny on his running form, as far as I know. Like he's, which is odd because he's like the fastest runner in the world, right? But he's had, oh shit, yeah,
So excuse the technical hiccup once again, but as we're saying, so we're talking about standards and how Usain Bolt was under scrutiny for his running technique despite being the fastest man in the world.
yeah. There was some. I think there was like some sort of maybe not necessarily like scrutiny in his technique, but I think especially for his like size and stature, it wasn't like the right necessarily body of an Olympic sprinter, especially one that's gonna win and break records. And look where we are now.
And yet, yeah, yeah. And maybe that's an important idea when it relates to the problem with standards, which is that um, I think one of my theories, I guess, or what I believe is that standards come from um, kind of collective knowledge that is
Yeah,
kind of chipped away at, added to them, that's
of
taken
course.
off over time. And I think it really depends on who is contributing to the collective knowledge. So who are the practitioners,
Hmm.
who are the teachers, but then also recognizing that standards come generally not from working with one person, but from, maybe a coach will work with thousands of people and would start to realize that there are certain patterns or certain things that on average are pretty good cues given a certain element or
Sure,
exercise. So they might say
sure.
during a squat, on average, people tend, a lot of people tend to slouch and lose the neutral spine. So I'm going to incorporate the neutral spine as a standard. Whereas if everyone that you ever worked with always kept a straight back, you might not even think of it as a thing to consider. You're just like, yeah, just do like, okay, so you just do what you always do. And then you think
Hmm.
about the legs, for example. Um, so a standard is something that's designed to, or it's developed from looking at a collective group of people and then coming up with averages, and therefore a standard is never going to perfectly fit any individual. It's always going to be, maybe it gets some people most of the way there, but there's always going to
Hmm.
be a little bit of a differential that needs to be filled up with figuring out what works best for your body. And so if you always comply dogmatically to standards, then you might look at someone like Usain Bolt and say, this guy doesn't or isn't operating to the standard. The standard is kind of the gold standard. If you're not doing the standard, then
Yeah.
you're leaking capacity, and that doesn't recognize that, well, maybe the optimal standard for this guy is actually different from the general standard that you're thinking about. So
Well,
that
here
can
and
be a
here's
trap.
and yeah, well, and exactly what you're saying, that can be a trap, and I think it is a trap in a weird way too, right? Because just like you're saying with like the Usain Bolt scenario, and you know, and as I was saying earlier, he wasn't necessarily built to be a sprinter or this and that along those lines. I think standards are also from, as you said, what we know, and what we know isn't the the all in all. You know, it's not the all, it's not the everything,
No one
and
knows everything.
we're continually learning.
Yeah.
And I think if you're taking standard as gospel and as concrete, then you're also like closing your mind to almost like even like learning yourself in a weird way.
Mm,
You know what I mean? If that's kind of correlating properly,
mm,
and it kind of, as I said, like streamlines you. Like, oh, no, that's wrong, or that's
mm,
wrong. What, can you explain why it's wrong, or are you just following the standard? Like, do you really understand the standard and what it really means?
mm.
You know what do you get where I'm kind of going with it? You
But
know?
that's a tough problem for a beginner, especially because
Well, of course, of course. You know what I mean? Like 100%. But like you find this with like experienced lifters that have mastered the standard, but they haven't mastered the understanding of it. You know,
Yeah.
it's almost like, and I find this a lot with physiotherapists, right? There's a standard, like, you know, someone has back pain, you're gonna work on loosening up their, you know, serrated, or loosening up their
Psoas?
psoas, and, you know, create an extension through the back. But back to what I'm saying, like, do they know how to do that properly, or are they just putting the leg through that motion and jamming their elbow?
Yeah. Are you following a template and kind of monkey see, monkey do, or are you, you know, using this piece of knowledge of this standard to actually
Yeah,
help you deal with this very unique individual and situation?
yeah,
On the other hand, though, so we've taken the one case of, well, if you dogmatically stick to standards, then you're going to run into problems. But on the other
hmm
hand, if you don't follow any standards at all, I think there are also problems, right? Because
oh, of course, right?
you might, I think the first thing that comes to mind, I'd like to hear what you think about this, and you know what comes to your mind too. But what comes to mind for me when I think about abandoning standards entirely, especially for a beginner, is, well, there are, given certain goals, there are better ways to do that, or more quicker and more effective and more efficient ways to get to a goal than others. So, for
hmm
example, if your goal is to, I mean, I'll take a ridiculous example just to illustrate the point. If your goal
Sure.
is to do a, you know, a full range of motion, chest to bar, chin up,
Okay.
there are going to be more effective techniques than, for example, holding little weights in your fingers and just curling them back and forward to work on like this particular element of grip,
Area,
unless you just happen to be a person where this is an extreme weak link. But even
of
then, there are
course.
probably more effective ways to do it. So if you, I could take a, you know, I could take a little case and I could just curl it up and down and do this 1,000 times a day, every day, and I don't know, maybe I'll get to doing a chin up by doing that, but I guess probably not. So there are obviously more, like,
Yeah.
if you take an extreme case, there are obviously
Cost
more.
versus reward. Cost
Yeah,
versus
yeah,
reward.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, you
And I
know,
do think, sorry, and I do, just to break it down as we're still going on this, I do think that's what standards also help do too, right? Cost versus reward. It's like,
yeah,
you're going to learn how to be fit. You want to learn how to be healthy. These are the standards. And then if you use like any tool in life, but if you understand that those are the standards, but those aren't the, as we said, know all and tell all, and those are just like that star guideline of like, learn this and then you can expand on this yourself if you really understand it. Then I think it's really like helping you with that process of, like, as you said, trial and error, and like, I'm going to be fit instead of like a baby into a new world like Bambi. It's kind of helping you understand. But as I said, I think the difficulty in the fitness world, and it could be just like, it's been, I have a theory on this, and we'll go with standards and stuff like that. I think it all ties in. But back in the day before technology, we were a lot more naturally fit.
before which technology? Because we've always
Like,
had,
just let's just say like TVs and radio, like
so like
before,
before electronics.
before, yeah, exactly, sorry, before like electronics and like the more like consumption type of like electronics and stuff like
Sure.
that.
Yeah, yeah, okay.
We're a lot more naturally fit, which means like I think people were doing a
Why?
lot more movement, just a lot more, like, I think work itself, life, hobbies had to do with more just not being stationary. And I
Mm.
think that's a big problem for people today and everything. And I think with that, when it came to fitness, as we talk about like kind of that alignment of the body, if your body's working better, it can adopt a lot more better positions without being stuck. So if people are working every day, you know, maybe doing like gardening, walking around more, going to like social gatherings outside and moving around and everything, because there wasn't this consumption of sitting down on your computer or watching TV. We got to the TV ages and there was a lot more of that, but that's where that shift started to happen. There was less of a standard in fitness because I think less people needed to even know what was going on. Even if you watch like videos of like Arnold training back in the day, or like old school like fitness videos, people are doing like squats and like bench press, and they're not necessarily fitting the standards that we have today, but their bodies look capable of adopting the position.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So I
Mm.
think there was less need for like direct standards because people were working out and their bodies were able to adapt those positions. So there wasn't like a high injury rate or pulling my back or jamming my neck. You know what I mean? I went to the
Yeah.
gym and I did a bench press and all of a sudden my neck is tight for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I could be talking complete bullshit, but that's just I think that's just like my thought process on it, right? And just healthier people more in tune with their bodies, right? Even
Yeah.
obesity rates, like all these things we talk about, right? And then I think the more and more that we got into like this media age and like all this like electronics and everything that we have, uh, obviously fitness started to become like a cool thing, being healthy and everything, because we started to now notice technology was really consuming people and causing issues. And I think that's when like a lot of standards got put into practice for the masses. And I think that's when we noticed a lot of issues because a lot of the people that were working out before the crazes were like pretty active people for their whole life. You know what I mean? For the most part. So back to what we talked about those back in the day, they're always working out, so their bodies are more adaptable even to potentially doing the wrong thing and not having the repercussions. But when you had a whole bunch of office workers looking at Instagram now and saying I want to get fit, and then they're doing squats and the standard of the squat, even if, let's just say for argument's sake, is push of the heels, bum back straight, their body doesn't even know how to adopt that position. And I
Mm.
think that's where standards started to become an issue in a weird way because it was kind of like easy for everyone. Like this is it. This is how you do it. As long as you do it like this, your body will somehow just adopt it. You know, and I
Yeah.
think that's where like those standards start to come out because we started realizing that you needed direction, you needed understanding to really fix it. But that's where I think there's really like a lack of like understanding the standards and like getting people to understand that too, you know.
Well, I really like something that Ido Portal says, which is that when it comes to movement, there are no incorrect movements. There's
It's
only
true.
there's only lack of preparation, um, and lack of awareness and improper preparation. Um, which to my mind as well puts everything into the context of goals, because I think we need to recognize that when we're applying a standard, if we investigate maybe where that standard came from or why it was developed, we understand who it's for and in what context.
Sure.
Because there are probably certain principles that you and I probably use all the time, certain cues that are pretty common and that we wouldn't freely abandon, just because we recognize that if you build these habits, for example, a hip hinge might be one, really
Sure.
isolating the
Sure.
hip hinge.
Sure.
That if you work on that hip hinge, that there are so many other movements that are very beneficial to achieving certain goals, like
Of
health,
course.
fitness, strength, mobility, that build upon a hip hinge. So you could have a certain standard of a hip hinge and what that is, and how to learn that or how to teach it, um, and that might be useful because you have certain as a coach you might have a plan in mind that, well, I would like to have this person get to a point where they can be doing this movement later on. We might start with
Of
a simple
course.
hinge, we might turn that into a deadlift exercise because their goal is strength or building muscle or whatever, and then or maybe their goal is to develop skills, so we might use that hinge eventually to do like a snatch and work on Olympic lifts.
Mm-hmm.
But the standards can help, and all of it comes back to what you were saying, which is that it's cost and reward, and the cost ultimately, part of it is injury, I suppose, or damaging the
Sure.
body irreparably, damaging it to a point where it's affected permanently.
To be honest, on the surface area, at least of most of the people that I did consultations with, now injury is a bigger one, but for a lot of the people, man, it's results. It's looking good. A lot of these people don't even I don't think they even, because they're so far removed from their body, a lot of these people, I don't even think that they understand that they could and are more susceptible to injury.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's the reward, though. So we're talking about cost versus
Yeah,
reward. So the
true,
aesthetic
true.
the aesthetic isn't the cost. The cost
Yeah,
that we're
you're right.
the cost to the way that you're training is the risk of injury or damaging the body,
Mm,
and how that would affect other aspects of your life. But also the cost is ultimately time, because we are on this earth or in this body and in this life for a finite period of time. That is the one kind of finite resource that is guaranteed, at least on a subjective individual level. So when we're training, we have to recognize that you only have so much time, and that's again where injuries come into play too, because if you get injured, even if you can recover from it, it's going to take time to get back there. So I think it's really standards are very useful because they can help save time ultimately.
Yes.
Because I think we could run a thought experiment where if you had an individual on a desert island, and let's say they had all their food was taken care of, and there were no threats to their survival, or no lions that were going to jump out and eat them. If you gave that individual unlimited time and a healthy body, they were in the body of a 20-year-old, let's say, for that entire time, they would probably figure out everything. They'll probably figure out how to do everything that their body's capable of doing. And they probably wouldn't even need any kind of standard or guidebook. They would just figure it out through pure trial and error.
That would be so cruel, but that would be so cool and cruel at the same time. Imagine just Truman Show someone on an island. Okay, now we're going really crazy, but imagine Men in Black, Memory Flasher, Truman Show together. So you wipe his memory of like kind of like, you almost leave him with like the basics, like just basic like programming, like basic Microsoft, like he knows how to walk, run, program cooking, whatever, like what food is, this and that, but he just is there, and then he just explores.
But then you need to run a simulation where you can accelerate, because you're limited by your time as an observer, as a viewer. You only have your life to watch him. So you need to run this simulation and then accelerate it forward, like, hundreds, thousands of years, and see how long it takes for him to develop a one-armed handstand, to develop a one-armed chin up.
I have a solution for this. We add Interstellar into this, and you put him on that planet. That 10 minutes is 1 year on Earth or whatever it was. Bam.
And then
hyperbolic time chamber. Dragon Ball Z. Just for a good measure.
So the interstellar hyperbolic, or hyperbaric. What was the other movie? Men in Black, Mind Erasing.
Yeah. And Truman Show.
Yeah, and we make it a TV show. Yeah, exactly. So, but I think ultimately, to bring it back around, the point of the standard is because we don't have that. We don't have that situation where life goes on infinitely. So we create standards, we codify them in writing and in communicating them verbally, and we transfer them from person to person and from generation to generation to help you get to where you want to go quicker, and safely, like you said.
Now, how do you tell someone their standards are wrong, and can standards be wrong?
Yeah, you say your standards are wrong. That's how you say it.
Now, what if they rebuttal you? For example, let's say someone is doing prancercise.
I don't know what that is, but I can imagine.
I'm pretty sure I've showed you the video. This is the lady that's prancercising and is exercise through prancing. So you prance around.
Sure.
And you exercise.
Yeah, sure.
So let's say she were to tell you that was effective.
At what? That would be my question. Effective at what?
Fitness.
What do you mean? How are you defining fitness?
Getting healthy.
What do you mean by healthy? I'm keeping it
basically like people, and these are the questions that regular people can't answer. And I think it goes back to like knowing what standards are and understanding them. You know what I mean? If you ask these same questions, which these are the probing questions that we ask clients that we're going to be working with and stuff too, right? Just not, I wouldn't even say too. They're not like probing as in like crazy questions, but they're just questions that people know the surface answer to.
You're gathering intel. You got to know what the situation is before you change it.
But that's the funny part about it that I find about fitness and standards is, and I guess back to like to the next question kind of segue, who makes the standards? Because that's what I find is the issue with the standards of fitness is a lot of people take these standards just for what they are, and they don't try and explore them, or it's just like it almost like it is what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
don't understand it, or they don't want to understand it, or they're kind of told from like the masses and even professionals, right? I've even heard professionals, you know this more than ever because you're on the gym floor a lot longer than me for the last couple years of life and seen a lot more on that gym floor, even though I saw a lot. But you know, a lot of these trainers know, you know, the standards, but they have no idea what it really means and like the execution of it. And they're like, fitness professionals are telling these people that even know less, and no one really knows what's actually going on, you know. And I think
Yeah.
that's tough. That's tough for people, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I think that happens for a few reasons. I think first and foremost, it's just the trainers or whoever it is that's, you know, trying to learn isn't really diving into it. They're not really committing to it.
Yeah,
They're just kind of they've got one foot in the water and the other foot's on land. It's I think when you commit to a path, you start to see, you know, you start to see what's going on. I think if you just want to work to pay the bills and do the bare minimum, then yeah, you'll just sort of pick up bits and pieces here and there, as long as it doesn't, you know, seem to do any harm, and your clients still get along with you. Because, you know, let's be honest, when you take a beginner, which is who most people going to see a personal trainer is a beginner.
yeah,
A
of
few
course.
people are intermediate and advanced, but the vast majority are beginners. And any beginner doing any kind of program for any length of time is going to get some results because they've not
Yeah,
been doing anything before. And so if you have a trainer who's just picking up, you know, bare minimum knowledge, what they're doing doesn't hurt their clients and they're going to get results, then they'll just keep doing that and they keep getting paid and keep paying the bills, but they're
yeah,
not going to progress very far in their career and in their own practice. The second big problem which relates is not having a personal practice and not practicing what you preach, essentially.
yeah.
um, you know, plenty of trainers would.
Can we pause on that note for a second because you said something I kind of want to touch on it. It's
Sure.
on the standards process, but it's
Yeah.
more on the other side. Isn't it weird that in the fitness world, the standard for a new personal trainer is to get new clientele? And it kind of is mind-boggling to me that like someone that is brand new at learning something is trying to teach someone that's brand new at learning it.
That's very interesting. I hadn't considered that before.
You know what I mean? It's like kind of it's like a weird and I understand that you have to work and get experience and learn these things, but it's like it's weird to me too that like again, in order to be a fitness professional talking about standards, I could be any Joe Schmo, and I've seen this happen all the time. Walk into CanFit, go get the standard certificate, and become a personal trainer the next week, and hired. I've seen people in my gym at Good Life doing calf raises for half an hour with a client. And maybe like breaking it down with standards, I think maybe the governing bodies are part of the issue, right?
Certainly.
Because you as a consumer are going in knowing not even what you want and expecting results from that. And a lot of the times you're getting someone that has no idea how to even conceptualize any of that.
Dude, let's spill some insider knowledge. And it's not even that insider, it's pretty easy to access. But in Canada, at the very least, if you, I'm pretty sure that this is just the way that the law works. Maybe there's some dodgy business going on, who knows? So I won't name any businesses, but in Ontario, Canada, again, it could be different in different provinces, but in Ontario, Canada, you can be employed as a personal trainer before you even get your personal training certification, because you're hired under the condition that you will acquire that certification within your probation period, which is the first 3 months of your employment. So you could have trainers, and I've seen this personally, you could have trainers who have literally zero
Zero experience.
experience in, well, I shouldn't say that. I haven't seen a trainer who's like never done any exercise before themselves and they're not had any
Sure,
knowledge into it. But generally, they're kids who
sure.
have, you know, played sport or whatever growing up. They're young. They want to get it. They're going for a job. They want to work as a trainer, and they're working with clients. Often these are clients who, you know, maybe older or have some pre-existing injury. You know, just the average person. And they're working with an absolute beginner, and they themselves have no qualifications because it's not legally required of them for the first 3 months of their employment.
Yeah.
Which
That's
is,
that's multiple I think I think that's pretty much across the board.
Yeah, I don't think
Like
it's just one gym. I think it's an industry
I've
standard.
heard that happening with gyms that have gone out of business in the past, not to name names. I've seen that happening with, you know, bigger box gyms that are open right now, not to name names.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and it's really bizarre to me too, you know, and especially in this day and age too, where the beginners coming in again are not those like 1940s, 1930s bodies where you're, you know, generally healthy because your movement every day is natural and a little less sedentary, you know. Like we're getting people now in that are considered, and the scary part about this, they consider themselves healthy because the general population of what our average health is so far removed from what healthy is that
Yeah.
if people are in the average, they look around, they're like, well, I'm better shaped than this guy, I'm worse shaped than that guy, but I'm general. And I think that's dangerous because general is actually unhealthy now,
They're
right?
confusing
But
what is average with what is normal.
exactly. And they're coming in and they're thinking of themselves as average. And we know now that me and you personally, average is very far removed from healthy, whether that's dietary, physically, hydration. Shout out to all my hydro homies, Reddit hydro homies. But you know what I mean? Like they just don't understand, and then you're handing something over to someone else that barely understands this, that hasn't, you know, put necessarily, not to knock their experience in the gym, but you know, very rare we've seen people come in that don't have experience of taking courses that really understand the concepts. You
Yeah.
know, it's there. I would say personally, me, I'm less of a course construct type of learner. Like I learned a lot through like free learning with like you and like just luckily for me, I don't know, physically, like I can really conceptualize it well and put it together well and it just visually like see it, right? And I think you're like that too. And I think that attests to like all the physicality that we've done as kids and stuff like that. Um but it's just, yeah, I just think it's crazy that these people are coming in with such problems and they're just given to these beginners that have no idea how to just even give them an ounce of help. But the worst part is just like we talked about a little bit earlier and touched on, when you have a snippet of information, it's almost more dangerous than knowing too much.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, because it's like this is it, this is the gospel, and you don't know that, right?
And what's tragic, and I think you'd agree, is that I'm not saying that getting a certification in any way qualifies you truly
Absolutely not.
to be a
Yeah,
personal trainer. I think the certification standards in Canada, but probably in many countries, I can't, you know, Australia has a bit more stringent.
sure.
I don't know about other parts of the world, but you know, I would imagine that the just getting a certification is like, this is the bare, this isn't even sufficient, but let's just say it's the bare minimum. And
Yeah,
the way that it's set up in Canada at least is that even the bare minimum is not required. Let's say, you know, you could start working without
of
even
course.
having a certification, and that's, so you're,
Yeah,
if the bar is already low here, you're letting people get in here, which is, it's insane and it's dangerous. And it's really bad
and
because
just to show the polarizing effect, the people that they're you generally helping are like at this level of like needing, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like their need is up here,
yeah, yeah, exactly,
you know.
exactly. And it just occurred to me, you know, that on a business level, it becomes, it's really tricky and dangerous, because if it were a purely free market, like if all these trainers were working as pure free agents and running their own businesses, then they
Yeah,
would simply go out of
which
business. Or
we can really go on touch on those topics in the business side of training some other time,
yeah,
but we
yeah.
should do that.
Um, but you know, if it were just an open free market and these
Yeah,
trainers are working for themselves, then they would probably realize very quickly that it's not a sustainable business model, because they might get a couple of
no,
people
it's
that they
not.
work well with, but most people are going to hire them for a session or two, realize that they don't really know their stuff, and just wouldn't work with them anymore. The problem
Yeah,
is when you get hired by a big box gym, is that you know, you have salesmen working for you that are kind of curating the clientele. Maybe they're picking and choosing people that wouldn't really know any better and then feeding them to you as a brand new trainer. And
Honestly
it's,
though, just to touch on what you said prior, people will know. I don't think they will. Honestly,
well,
I think a lot.
most wouldn't. Yeah. Yeah. I think you're
Yeah,
right.
I think a lot of the time that people go to a trainer and or people go to anything for the most part. Like I think there's a couple different types of people. There's the people that are informed that might not even know a subject but they're just information people and they like to gather information on stuff. So they might learn what's right, what's wrong by, as we have easier resources now, Google this, that. But I think for the most people coming in and me personally like seeing a lot of them and for you, you are at a higher standard and are at a way higher standard than a lot of entry level trainers. So you're not seeing the entry level clients in a
Yeah.
sense. You're getting the more committed people, whatever. And the people that had more of a general interest too, you know what I mean? Like that would are kind of better to adopt that mindset and are really kind of there. The general public, man, these people have no idea. As I said, like my coworker back when I was working at that a gym back in the day, every client calf raises for half an hour, and I know you. In my head, I was like, these people are gonna fire her, and like just she had great reviews from these clients,
Mm,
and it was a crime. It was a crime.
mm,
It was a literal crime to me. It was a wonderful
yeah.
person, wonderful person, and I'm sure that was part of the wonderfulness about her sessions and how great she was. But my God, bro, it was mind blowing to me. And at that point, I didn't even know. I just knew this. I just knew the standards. I didn't hadn't really explored the standards fully yet. I was exploring more than a lot of people. I asked my body questions. I didn't necessarily ask my body questions in the right context, but I was asking my body questions. A little bit more on the extreme end. I was pushing it to limits and this and that. But I was asking my body questions. But like it was just crazy to me that like that proved me there too that people really have no idea. Because that was one of my concerns too as a new trainer, right? Because again, I came from it, and I think background and experience really matters. And the one part I didn't really touch at back when we were talking about introductions, after I started working out with my buddy at the recreation center, that was in the summertime. He went back to school, and I was not struggling to do stuff on myself, but I kind of lost my standard, my guide, right? Like he was telling me what to do, and I never really searched for myself, so that was it. And December rolled around, and I went to my buddy's birthday, and a mutual friend of ours was there, and he was a big lifter, short, stocky guy, so really good biomechanics, just naturally, like less room for error, as I call it. You know what I mean? Uh, Wonderful dude, Peter. If you ever see this, I always tell you, you were the initial catalyst to me where I am today. So I thank you for that. But I was talking to him. I was like, hey, bro, I go to the gym now. I know you work out, and I was genuinely interested in the process of it by this point. Like I started to, as you said, I started to get the soreness, and I started to kind of feel progression. And I guess I was programmed for this too with all the soccer because all the training and going to practice and practice and practice and repetition. Knee the ball, kick the ball, knee the ball, kick the ball, left foot, right foot. And actually, now that I think about it, asking the question, holy shit, why can I do five in a row with my right foot? And why the hell am I hitting the parking lot with my left foot on the first one? And how can I match that to be the same? And so I had a general interest for it. And I asked him if I could work out with him. And he said, if you're serious, you'll call me next week and we'll go. And I went with him for 2 years straight, every single day, 5 days a week.
Wow.
2 years straight, 5 days a week. And then from there, I started doing my own research and I ran into like information of like, more standard stuff, like kind of like I don't want to say necessarily the Instagram cookie cutter programs, but it were like the inspiring guys and like the fitness guys at the time, like Greg Plitt. I don't know if you remember Greg Plitt,
No, I don't.
like the super fitness guy. Like you've probably seen pictures of him. He crazy accident. He was the one doing a commercial for a protein bar or something. He was running on a train track, and the train track had switched sides, and he died.
Fuck.
Horrible story.
Yeah.
But like I started researching, reading on bodybuilding.com, like T Nation, reading, what are bodybuilding programs for? What is endurance for? What is this for? What is a squat? What is the standard for a squat? What is a high bar squat? So I started to really not just understand like the standard of a squat. Like there's a standard and then there's different standards within the standards. And then how do those standards work and how can you cross-reference standards?
Mm.
And this was all before I even decided, years before I even decided to get into to be a trainer, right? So when I went into being a trainer, it was really weird to me because as a as a consumer of the gym, right? As a consumer of the gym, I had learned so much from just the resources I had around. So I've just assumed that everyone else in the gym had some sort of understanding like this.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
So I've
Yeah.
I'm sure you had it too because again you had the same mindset going in. It wasn't just like I wanted bench press heavy. It's I want to bench press heavy, but I want to understand why I can bench press heavy and how to do it better.
Yeah.
It wasn't just my shoulder flares here, whatever, just push the weight, right? And like, and I think that the weird part was going in, as I said, is I had just on my mind, I was like worried, am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to do the right thing? Are they going to know my quality, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And in a weird way, I kind of wish I didn't realize this early because I think I would have been more keen on the development side of it. But I think early in my stages, I had known so much more than a lot of people, especially people taking courses in the entry level, this and that I kind of shunned myself away from courses
Mm.
because I kind of got ignorant and confident in a weird way,
Mm.
because I,
Like
I,
cocky.
I initially, well, kind of, because I initially went in with this standpoint of like, people are going to know. And then I started seeing calf raises and, and back breaking and knees blowing up in squats and people coming in with crutches saying that they tore their ACL in the escalator and it's a freak accident. And I'm like, no, it's the way your trainer was making you squat for the last 6 months, stuff like that. And then I start to realize that even my minimal understanding of my own just searching within my body and like learning stuff by myself, I've already been up here based on the standards of people going to these courses. So I kind of devalue courses, and that's kind of where I revalued courses after I got that slap in the face of waking me up with the injury,
Mm.
and then realizing that there's other standards out there that really kind of fit, I guess, more what I was looking for, but I call that right. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Like more what I'm looking for, right? And like that was cool. And just even touch on standards where we're kind of going with like who makes the standards and stuff like that. I think with the shift in the world and like with health coming back, I actually mentioned this to someone today. I think there was a big jump in like modern technology and we looked a lot to technology to solve our problems. And I think we're realizing that technology is great, but not only is it not solving all the problems, it's causing a lot more problems. So I think there's going to be a lot more integration of technology with humanity and our health, and like we're going to take care of our health more and like our brain more and our bodies more. So I think in a weird way, and I think you've noticed this too on Instagram and this and that, it started off as I don't want to go too deep into it, but just almost like better looking fit people preaching stupidity and people taking that as gospel. And now it's less about look, even though the product of doing the right stuff, aka like people like a Roy or the guy that you were mentioning earlier with the sick videos and the lighting and stuff, look wonderful.
Mm.
But it's from a new standard, not just of like hard work and ground and pound and pavement of what people were saying before, but health and wellness and that well-rounded. I think those standards, if correct me if I'm wrong, are starting to make the front pages more and more, and like and just people starting to reach people a lot more. And I think it's kind
Hopefully.
of like I sure as hell hope so. I've been seeing some good. Honestly, I've been seeing some good stuff. Um, even like stuff that like bigger box gyms are doing. I think it's just gonna take a switch in the mindset too, right? Like anything in life, like even politics right now, or even just like a lot of business life right now, it's a lot of, and the tough, it's a lot of older people. And the tough part with a lot of older people right now, just not to knock on like age or generation or anything like that, is there's technology happening so fast and shifts in technology are happening so fast that I don't want, they're not purposely stopping progress, but they've been stuck in their mindsets for so long. And we're getting so much information quicker now. And a lot of those younger minds are allowed more autonomy in these positions, allowed more freedom, I think. And like that's what's kind of a shift in like, I want to say the world and like business and even fitness itself. And I'm even seeing like bigger box gyms, younger mind people that are getting a little bit older now that have had good ideas but are getting the platform now, being able to really implement these things that we're talking about, you know? Like I know a guy from, I don't know if do copyrights really work on these or anything, like Good Life, guy from
No.
Good Life. And he's, you know, he's creating like a really, really, really good program of learning for trainers, like a
Mm.
learning platform for trainers, more from the business side because he's a business guy. But it's not just like sell, sell, sell. It's like more of like just like kind of what we're talking about, not just squat, squat, squat. What is the squat? What are different variations of squat? What is the importance of a squat? Why do we need, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
the meat and potatoes and like more like it gives it such, just like we do with lifting. The more in depth you go with it, I think the more humane of a value comes from it. You know what I mean? In a weird way, like you just like it, almost like the process. Like everyone talks about the process, right? You know, it's the people that like fake the process that aren't humble, and it's the people that, for the most part, anyways, we're like talking in generalities, but the people that go through that process tend to have that humbleness about them because they understand what it takes. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But I hope there's a change. I think there's a change. We can only hope that there's a change in standards because we've seen some horrible standards be put out there.
Yeah, well, when it comes to Instagram, I hope that it continues in the direction that you're describing, which is going from the aesthetic itself being the product, being what you're buying.
Yeah,
I'm buying the way this person looks or the desire to look like that, and
yeah. Well, it
recognizing,
was so weird too, right? Because with Instagram, just like any social media, it blew up so fast.
yeah,
So there was just like it was just like everything at once. What was right? What was wrong? You know, not just necessarily like fitness wise and like movement wise, but like just in like life. You know, like what is healthy for us? What is not? What is the right information? How do we process all this information that we've never had to come at us like this? You know?
yeah, for sure. Um, and yeah, I think that shift is hopefully going in the direction of using of the aesthetic itself being the product versus towards the aesthetic being the byproduct, where you present the aesthetic in order to show that this is one of the byproducts of the practice, but that
Yeah.
it just sort of grabs your attention so that you want to learn more, that you can go deeper into it and you can discover that there's maybe some substance behind that
Mm-hmm.
process that's about more than just the way you look, but it is about the way you feel. It's about the way you think. It's about the way you move. And it's about learning, I believe, about yourself ultimately, using these tools to learn more about yourself,
Yeah.
and then from there, how to operate in the world, and how to achieve what you want to achieve. But um, I hope it's heading in that direction. I'm hoping it's not just a
Yeah.
bias where I'm just following more people like that and the mainstream culture isn't shifting in that direction.
And Instagram is streamlining you into more and more videos of that. So
Yeah,
we
yeah,
just
just
think that we're
the
getting more.
algorithm. It's very hard
Yeah.
to say. I want to finish on one other topic that kind of would be our first, maybe our first listener question, so to say. It comes from my wife, um,
Hi, honey.
which is it's. I'll try to I'll kind of paraphrase her question, but obviously when we're talking about standards, this is a very technical aspect where we're talking about the mechanics, the technique, the sequence of events that take the an exercise is made up of. Maybe you could eventually go into things like programming a session, periodizing
Yeah.
over 6 week, 12-week, 18-week periods, um, and all the other principles that come along with that, like progressive overload, for example, and consistency and um, volume and reps and sets. So these are all all the technical aspects that go into the standards
Sure.
and go into what we do. But there's also this other layer, um, which we kind of touched on, and it's a little bit, I find it's very difficult to talk about because it's almost when. So for you and I,
Yeah.
when
The invisible.
Yeah, when you've been training for so long and so involved with the body and exploring the body for so long, you just kind of take for granted a lot of the internal processes and just little
Yeah,
things that you do to improve the quality and to get the most out of not just the sessions and the workouts, but life too. But we could put in the context of
yeah,
working out. And so what Honey wants to know really is what are these internal processes? What are the things that are going on, mentally? What kind of awareness are you bringing to the body? What do you do when you're doing a workout that can improve the quality or improve the results beyond just understanding how to do the move? You could do a squat. So what's the, if you had yourself and an identical twin and a clone of you, and both of
yeah,
you were doing, visually you may be doing the exact same squat. Mechanically, by the standard, it looks exactly the same. But we could recognize that each of those versions of Steve could have a very different process going on internally.
sure.
And so what kind of techniques, what kind of processes do you use that you find useful in incorporating into a practice that are beyond or maybe deeper than just those technical standards, but are those more internal, psychological, psychosomatic
Yeah.
processes?
So based on the parameters that we've learned through, like, as I said, standards and everything like that, and not just movement standards of, squatting and sitting down and standing up. I think exploring, and something that's not really taught that much in like certain courses, is, I think, I I take that back. It's actually getting taught a lot more now, but something that for the last little bit up until probably about 5 years ago wasn't taught that much. But it really is getting touched now with like FRC, fascial stretch therapy, everything. I think my personal thought process is, I think of the body for what it is. I think of a lot of people don't, they look at like the exercise, they look at the movement that they're doing, but they don't almost like context their body into it. I look at my body for what it is, in a sense of like bone socket joints, hinge joints, ligaments, tendons, muscles. And I honestly try and pay attention the best I can as to what would structural symmetry be in a neutral position,
Mm-hmm.
and then how do I need to manipulate my joints, ligaments, tendons. And I'm not sitting here thinking, like my upper, well, I am thinking in generalities, but I'm not thinking, like my third head of my bicep brachial needs to flex more. I'm just more by feel, but of structural integrity. And then trying to keep that structural integrity in and out of the movement by changing the demand on my levers. So
Okay, so
almost like a pulley system, like push and pull, like cables. That's
can,
literally what goes through my head.
can you give a concrete example? Like, let's just take an exercise. Maybe a simpler one would be better, maybe like a bicep curl or
So
something, and then talk us through what that process might be as you're doing it.
so and so this is actually something I struggle with, to be honest. Like really putting into context what I think about when I work out,
Putting into
because
words.
for me it makes so
Yeah.
much sense. But when I talk to people, sometimes it just sounds like mumbo jumbo, or like doesn't make sense. I basically try and, in a weird way, so muscle tension, from what we know for a lot of the reasons, is manipulation of the structure, right? And how that happened, it could be from injury, or it could be from set positions that
Or
start to
you mean
cause your muscle.
chronic muscle tension, not muscle tension that you're
Sure.
doing because like you if you do a movement, you're tensing the muscle to make that joint move.
Yeah, but we're always in some sort of flexion tension. We're to sit up, we're in some sort of tension. Even to
Yeah.
have our arms here, there's some sort of
Yeah.
flexion going on,
To create any
right?
kind of movement, you need muscle contraction. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I said, as kind of what I was going on, what I personally try and do, and what I've found helped me, and like there was a book that really kind of gave me a little bit more of a visual of and even more of like a concept of what I'm trying to say, is it's almost like I think of basic anatomy. I think of,
Mm.
how do my shoulder joints need to rotate as I'm doing the bicep curl? How does this rotation need to work in unison with my hinge joint working? And how does the rotation of my palm all work with keeping me in the balance and being able to keep that muscle tension? And then as I'm going to a bicep curl, what needs to contract, because how we get growth from the muscle, stretch and contraction. what needs to contract, what needs to elongate, and how do I keep that proper support in those positions with that contraction, that elongation, and then how do I reverse that motion?
So if we think about, what makes up a practice is experience and knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, well, the benefit of knowledge, the benefit of standards is that it saves time. Perhaps the advice we could give is that it might be useful for a beginner to Google some musculoskeletal anatomy, or just look up, muscle anatomy, skeletal anatomy, anatomy of the body, anatomy of exercise, whatever terminology or whatever keywords gets you there. But it can really help to have um, a visual idea of what is going on under here and what the body even looks like and what it's made up of, so that you can then visualize those structures when you're doing an exercise. And even maybe you could take it a step further and say it's useful to also understand what muscles are we're aiming to engage or that are producing a certain movement.
I also think it would really help people understand the complexity behind it too. Because I one of the big issues I ran into with people coming into the gym, especially beginners that had no idea about anything, literally nothing, they thought that everything was so easy. Like a squat is literally just sitting. Like they don't understand that there's so much going on in their body to just allow that to happen. And just like any other structure, by doing it wrong consistently, they didn't even know that they were causing their life to be shortened, their knee health. You know what I mean? Their knee life or their hip life or whatever. They had no idea, you know? By understanding like the basics of anatomy, as I said, I think it'll just give people a understanding that it's not just a simple thing. It's not just sit down and stand up and all of a sudden things are gonna work by themselves. Like there could be issues and we have to fix these issues first. And by looking at that simple anatomy, as I said, like it gives you more of a concept of that, that it's not just magic. There's a
Yeah.
real there's a real thing to it. There's information to it. And I've ran into people, especially I've ran into some young kids that have took the approach of like literature and like reading and like nothing like crazy, but like as I said, like basic anatomy stuff.
Yeah.
And night and day, not only with what they're doing in the gym and the results with in every aspect of like health, feeling good, like performing well, getting like body results with whatever what they're looking for. But there was almost like a humbleness about it and a better like a better just
Appreciation.
environment for learn yeah and like just a better environment for learning for him and appreciation, you know what I mean? It just
Yeah.
it really just gave it meaning, it gave it understanding. And I think when people can understand how they're part of their body, just like we kind of talked about earlier, and if just I think reading basic anatomy really gets you to do that. Just even for some people, they don't even know that their heart pumps out blood throughout their whole body.
Mm.
Take that in, their heart is keeping them alive and they don't even know that their heart or how it pumps blood into their body.
Mm.
Of course you're not going to be scared of a heart attack. But when you understand, and I'm sure a lot of people that go to the hospital after a heart attack change their lifestyle after, if it's not like too late, because what do? They get information.
Well, it's like a lot of in our realm, fitness professionals. Someone gets an injury, and then they go deep into learning about the structure of that part of the body and what
Yeah.
causes the injury, and they become an expert in this particular.
Yeah.
And then they write a book about it, start a course,
Yeah.
and it's only until something starts to break down that you really start to
Yeah.
learn about it, because you want to get it back to working again.
Right. But prior to that, I think there's an ignorance there because you
Yeah.
just don't know, so you think you're okay. And I think that's the issue with, I think, just to finish up with our standards, the standard in fitness for so long has been, as you said, so low that like these people don't even know that they're causing heart attacks, these fitness professionals. Not necessarily heart attacks, but like injuries, issues, not helping people get to their goals
Yeah.
because they don't even know how the heart works.
Yeah, it's
You
basic
know?
knowledge, and then a failure to really test and verify that what they're doing actually does what they
Yeah.
think it does. But yeah, I think
Yeah,
I
like
guess
a squat's a squat's a squat. Just do it and you'll get results. Like a heart pumps, it's gonna do it and I'll be okay.
yeah,
Well, you fill that heart with fat, you fill that squat with bad posture, and all of a sudden you're popping kneecap.
Yeah. And I think to bring it back to the question of what are these internal processes, then I think maybe because to make it practical, the question is really coming from a place of the beginner mind. Like for a beginner, what advice can we give to help them, not just in terms of the technical aspect of their exercise or their training, but the internal process? And I think what we can say is it's useful to know what's going on with your
Sure.
body anatomically. So if you just do some basic research, get a sense of what it looks like, maybe whether you're looking at pictures of cadavers, or if you're
Of
looking at
course.
just illustrations.
Skeletal. I think the skeletal is also really good. Or
Yeah, look,
yeah,
go through
the
that's it. Recognize that there are layers, that you've got,
yeah,
this sort of base structure of the
ligaments.
skeleton, and then
Yeah.
then you've got the layers that work out from there. So if you
For
recognize,
remind me before our next podcast. I have a book. I'll do a shout out. It's great literature. This Swedish guy wrote it in 1984. It came to me in my life at Woodbine Beach, Toronto. Random day, I was sitting there. Some random guy found this book sitting down, and we started talking. And I was talking about fitness, and he thought it would be a book for me. It was a really weird scenario. And the book was written by this Swedish guy in 1984. He was a biokinetic PhD
mm,
or a professor, something along these lines. And dude, it is the most simple, direct, human body teaching standpoint I've ever seen. It's like a Bible. It
mm,
literally, you Supple Leopard.
yeah,
It's like almost like that, but even for like the anatomy in human body.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
like this is the bones. These are the bones. These are how they work together. These are the muscles. These are the ligaments. These are the tendons. These are how they work to make this movement. If you like, I'll give the shout out for the book next time, but it's
yeah. That sounds good.
crazy. It's crazy, but like I think that would be something that would be good for people, or as you said, like just general understanding of what they're working with, not
Yeah,
just what they need to do.
yeah. Because a common case is that you might ask someone to do, let's say, a squat, and then if you ask them to bring awareness to the working muscles, um, there may be very little to no awareness at all. It
Yeah,
might be like, oh, I just feel a kind of a vague pressure, or whatever. So I think part of that's training focus and attention, but it's also
yeah,
that there may not be a strong neuromuscular connection there, and so
yeah,
it can be really useful as a trainee when you're practicing to understand that there are those muscles do exist. You do have all the same,
yeah.
the same muscles as everybody else. Just
I will say
yeah,
if you're a coach too, it is important that you understand this too, and you can tell your clients to like start to understand this on a basic level, as
yeah,
opposed
of
to just
course.
kind of trying to, or as opposed to just trying to like teach it through themselves. Like give them stuff to read, tell them to go search stuff because it'll only make your sessions better, right?
And it's, man, these things are amazing tools, right? Because I can pull up my
Yeah.
phone and pull up an image and show someone rather than even having
Oh,
to
it's great.
describe it. So understanding, what is there can help you. Just like, the example I gave with my eyebrows, just knowing that
Yeah.
having a reference to know that I can do it with that
Like you
side.
do this side. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
and so if you've got nothing at all, then this reference becomes something external. It becomes either someone else doing it, or it becomes, an image in a book, for example, of, well, these are muscles that exist in your body, and they do have the capacity to contract. You just need to develop that, and we develop that, like we said at the beginning, through focused effort and consistency. Um, um, and then you obviously working with a great coach in particular will help you get there effectively, which means safely and quickly. But yeah, I think getting a basic understanding of what's actually going on is a really, really good start. So um, yeah, and then beyond that, you can go into different techniques that maybe we'll touch on in future episodes.
Sure.
Yeah,
So maybe some takeaways today. Don't just follow standards. Understand the standards and the process itself. And if you're not taught them, try and reach out in your own avenues to learn that yourself. And also, there are different levels of standards we can learn. And the more that we try and break down what standards are and understand the standards, the more that we can differentiate what standards are going to be more useful for us and more valuable for us. Because as we talked about too with standards, the whole point of standards is to help us save time.
yeah, Yeah.
So the more that we can even understand what standards are and how to actually utilize them, the more that we can look to avenues of learning and say, this one's a better standard, this one's a better standard.
Yeah, and the standards are going to save you time, but ultimately, the standard will also only take you so far, or any one standard will only take you so far. That
Of course.
it takes a combination of approaches, of perspectives, and maybe at some point even creating something yourself. Following your own path for your own body and find what works
Think
for you.
outside the box.
Yeah,
Use the
exactly,
standard as a basis and expand from it.
exactly. Um, but I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
We a little bit of an introduction, and then a bit of a discussion on standards in training and in fitness, and then
Mm.
just a bit of a discussion of those internal processes, and yeah, kind of relating it all together. But um, this will be the theme. Maybe next week will be completely different, but
Who knows?
yeah, who knows? But this has been great. It's been really good talking to you.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, and thanks for your thoughts, and for being a soundboard to bounce ideas off.
I always love talking to you, man. It's always very healthy for my brain and very enlightening, I would say.
Good.
And I only call you so I can see Keanu and Honey anyway. So
I understand. I
yeah,
totally
okay,
understand.
brother. Pleasure. Tell him I say hello and goodbye, and we'll
All
talk
right.
soon.
All right. Till next time.
See you, Benjamin. Till next time.